Look at the Eads Bridge in St. Louis. You see a beautiful, old piece of history, an engineering miracle from 1874. But what if I told you that history has a shadow, a hidden layer most people never see? This bridge has a documented, tragic secret. For over a century, it was the site of countless suicides. The first was on New Year's Day, 1904. The last waves came in the 1970s, with a major incident in April of 1975. The city was forced to act. They installed tall, curved fences in the 1980s, and the tragedies finally stopped. But that's where the real mystery begins. If the problem was solved, why do the stories persist? Why do guards talk about cold spots and footsteps when no one is there? Why do modern visitors report sudden waves of sadness or hear a sigh in the fog? This is not a simple ghost story. This is an investigation into something deeper, something science is just beginning to understand. We are going to dig into police archives, worker diaries, and engineer reports. We will follow a trail from the bridge's deadly construction, where men suffered in deep, pressurized chambers, to the river below that rarely gave back its victims. This story asks a frightening question. Can a place absorb human emotion? Can sorrow literally seep into iron and stone? If so, what happens when that sorrow is trapped inside a cage of modern fences? The truth is more fascinating and more haunting than any simple legend. This is a story about memory, the memory of metal, the memory of water, and the long echo of human pain. Stay with me until the very end. I promise you, you will never look at an old bridge or any historic structure the same way again. You will understand the weight it truly carries. For the full, shocking picture, please watch all the way through. And if you want to join us for more investigations into the unseen layers of our world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. Look at the Eads Bridge today, and you see strength. You see curves of iron against the sky. You see a beautiful old part of the city. But I want you to look deeper. I want you to look down. Because the true story of this bridge doesn't start in the air. It starts deep under the muddy water of the Mississippi River. It starts in the dark. And it starts with suffering. To build something this mighty, they had to go down, over 100 feet down, into the riverbed. Workers entered giant wooden boxes called caissons. These were like upside-down rooms pushed into the river bottom. The air inside was pumped so full of pressure to keep the water out, it felt thick. It was hard to breathe. Your ears would pop and hurt all the time. The men worked in the flicker of gas lamps, digging out mud and rock, while the whole weight of the river pushed down on the ceiling above them. Can you imagine that? The constant creak of wood, the smell of damp earth and sweat, the fear that the river could burst in at any moment. That was their every day. But the real horror was something they didn't understand, something they couldn't see. When the workers left that pressurized room and came back to the normal air at the surface, their bodies sometimes broke. The sudden change in pressure did something terrible. The nitrogen gas in their blood, which had been dissolved by the force, would fizz out, like opening a shaken soda bottle inside their veins. They called it caisson disease. We know it now as the bends. The symptoms read like a nightmare. A worker would get a blinding pain in his joints, doubling over as his knees and elbows screamed. Some itched as if their skin were on fire. Others collapsed, paralyzed. Some coughed up blood as their lungs filled with bubbles. The worst cases died in agony, their own blood turned against them. Over 100 men were seriously hurt. 14 never went home. They died for the foundation. Their pain is the literal bedrock of this bridge. Now think about that. We talk about a building's foundation as stone and concrete. But what about an emotional foundation? A memory foundation? From its very first days, before a single arch was raised, this place was a chamber of pain and fear. Those men weren't just laying stone. They were pouring their terror, their courage, and their agony into the ground. So I have to ask you a difficult question. What does a place remember? If you believe that energy cannot be created or destroyed, where did all that intense human feeling go? The sharp gasp of pain, the cold fear in the dark, the final, labored breath of a dying man. Did it just vanish? Or did it seep into the stone pilings that are still there, right now, buried beneath the water and the modern city? We often say a place has a feel to it, a heavy feeling, a sad feeling. We say it without really thinking. But what if we're sensing something real? What if the first memories of the Eads Bridge, the very first experiences locked into its structure, are not of celebration, but of suffocation, not of triumph, but of trauma? The brilliant engineer James Eads watched this happen. He saw his men fall ill. He was desperate to solve it. This was the price of his dream, and that price was paid in human suffering. So when you see the bridge, majestic against the sunset, remember what lies beneath. In the quiet mud, under generations of river current, lies a forgotten chamber of hurt. That is the true ground zero of our story. And it makes you wonder, can a wound in the earth, a wound filled with so much pain, ever truly heal? Or does it just wait, holding the memory for anyone who knows how to listen? The bridge opened in 1874. For 30 years, it was a symbol of the future, a wonder of the world. Trains carried hope and industry across its deck. The city looked at it with pride, but then a shadow fell. A new kind of memory was about to be made, a memory not of building, but of ending. It happened on January 1st, 1904, New Year's Day. While the city slept off its celebrations, a man walked onto the bridge. He wasn't a worker, he wasn't a traveler. We know very little about him, but his choice of moment speaks volumes. The start of a new year, a time for fresh beginnings. But for him, it was an end. He climbed onto the structure, and he jumped. He became the first documented suicide from the Eads Bridge. The newspapers the next day were brief and shocked. They called it a plunge. They didn't understand it. How could someone use this symbol of progress for such a final private act? Now you have to understand what was happening in St. Louis that year. The city was buzzing with its biggest dream yet, the 1904 World's Fair. Just a few months later, millions would flood into St. Louis. They would see dazzling electric lights, inventions from across the globe, a vision of a bright, modern century. The entire city was focused forward, building and preparing for this glorious future. And yet, right in the middle of all that hope, this single man chose the city's greatest symbol and stepped off into the dark. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it? The deepest personal pain can exist in the same place, at the same time, as the greatest public joy. They can share the same space and never touch. The bridge was now two things. To the world, it was a gateway to tomorrow. To this one man, and to those who would follow, it was a door closing forever. Why there? Why then? Was it just the height? The fame? Maybe. But let's go back to what we talked about last time. The foundation of pain. Could it be that this man, carrying a hurt he couldn't bear, was somehow drawn to a place that already held hurt in its bones? Not consciously, not like a magnet, but on a level we don't fully understand. Did he feel a kinship there? In a strange, terrible way? Did it feel like a place that would understand his silence? The river below didn't give him back. The Mississippi is a keeper of secrets. It took him, as it would take so many others. So the first mark was made. A new pattern was set. The bridge was no longer just a path across the water. It had become an option, a terrible, final option, on the map of a troubled mind. And here is the chilling thought. Once a path is walked, it becomes easier for the next person to find. It's a human thing. We follow paths others make. We see a solution, even a tragic one, and it becomes part of the landscape of possibility. That first jump in 1904, it was a breach. It showed that this strong, beautiful thing could be used in a new way, a way its builders never, ever intended. So picture it. The cold January air, the quiet morning after the party, the empty walkway, the sound of the river flowing below as it always has. In that moment, the bridge's story split in two. The official story of engineering triumph kept going, but a hidden, parallel story began. A story of quiet goodbyes, a story written not in steel, but in moments of absolute despair. And it all started with one man, on the first day of a new year, who saw no new beginning at all, only an end. He cast the first shadow, and that shadow would grow longer with every passing decade. We have talked about the bridge, we have talked about the people who stood on its edge, but we have missed the most powerful character in this story. It's not made of iron. It doesn't have a name you can read in a book. It's the water, the Mississippi River. This is not just a setting. This is a force, an ancient, thinking force. And it has its own rules. You have to understand what the river is, here at St. Louis. It's not a clear, gentle stream. It's a wide, brown, powerful monster of moving water. The current is strong, always pulling south. The water is full of mud and sand, what they call silt. You can't see more than a few inches below the surface. It's cold, even in summer, and it is deep. When someone goes into this river from that height, they are not just falling. They are being given to something that does not care. The records are clear, and they add a whole other layer of horror. In many, many cases, the river did not give the person back. Recovery was not guaranteed. It was rare. The police and the riverboat captains would search. They would drag the area with hooks and nets. But often, they found nothing. The person simply vanished. The powerful current would carry a body for miles, snagging it on underwater debris, burying it in shifting sand. Sometimes it would surface weeks later, far downstream. Sometimes, never. Think about that for the families. The sheer agony of that not knowing. There is no body to bury, no final goodbye at a graveside. There is only a missing chair at the dinner table and a terrible question that hangs in the air forever. Did they suffer? Where are they? The river holds the answer, and it does not speak. It turns a tragedy into a mystery that can never be solved. That is a special kind of pain, a wound that cannot close. So, the bridge offers the moment. But the river offers disappearance, a complete and total erase. For someone lost in the deepest pain, that promise of vanishing, of just being gone without a trace, might feel like a strange kind of mercy. The river promises to hold your secret forever. It will not judge you. It will just take you. This is where the supernatural feeling of this place grows stronger. In many cultures, moving water is seen as a boundary, a line between our world and another. The ancient Greeks believed the river Styx was the border to the underworld. The Mississippi, in its own way, serves that same purpose here. It doesn't lead to mythical lands, but to a very real, silent oblivion. When someone steps off the bridge, they cross a line we cannot follow. They go from the world of the living into the keeping of the river. And the river is a keeper. It doesn't often give back what it takes. Now pair that idea with our bridge, the iron structure full of human suffering, reaching out over this ancient, secret-keeping water. It's not just a high place, it's a gateway, a very specific, very powerful gateway, one made by man, placed over a force of nature that has its own mind. Does the energy of the bridge, the pain in its iron, somehow call to the river's power? Do they work together in a way we can't see? When you stand on the bridge now, you feel the wind. You see the beautiful view. But I want you to look down at that brown water flowing past, slow and powerful and silent. It has seen everything. It has held everything. It knows every story that ended at its surface, and it keeps them. It folds them into the mud and carries them away. The bridge may hold the memory of the fall, but the river holds the person, and it never, ever lets go. That is the true partner in this story. A partner that has been here for thousands of years before the bridge was even a dream, and will be here long after we are all gone. Let's leave the bridge for a moment. Let's go into a quiet room. The air is still and smells of old paper. A single light glows over a machine. This is a microfilm reader. It's how we look at old newspapers. And this is where the story changes from feeling to fact. This is where we hear the city's whisper, not from the wind, but from the page. We are going into the archive. I sat there for hours, rolling through the history of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch year by year. And there, scattered among the ads for new cars and the headlines about wars, I found them. The briefest of notes, the smallest articles, sometimes just 2 or 3 lines. A man plunged to his death from the Eads Bridge early yesterday. The body was recovered from the river near the bridge. An unidentified woman leaped from the span. Over and over and over again. The language is cold because it has to be. A newspaper can't feel. It can only report. But when you see these small stories, one after another, a pattern forms that takes your breath away. It's like listening to a slow, sad drumbeat through history. One beat in 1912, another in 1929, 2 more in the 1930s. The beat gets faster in the 1940s. The rhythm continues, steady and grim, all through the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s. You start to see the clues in the words. Despondent. That word appears often. It means a deep sadness with no hope. They would sometimes list a person's age. So many were young, in their 20s and 30s. They would sometimes mention a note left behind. And then, the most common phrase of all, the police found no evidence of foul play. It was just a choice, a personal private storm that ended on a public bridge. Now think about the dates. The 1930s, the Great Depression, the entire country is in despair, and the bridge's sad drumbeat gets louder. The 1940s, a world war ends. Men come home with sights in their eyes they can't forget. The drumbeat continues. The bridge wasn't just a place, it was a barometer. It measured the pressure of the city's hidden pain. When the pressure got too high for someone, this is where they came to let it out. This is where they broke. Reading these, you are not reading about strangers. You are reading the last public record of a private hell. This was the final thing about them that ever made the news. Their entire life, all its joys and loves and struggles, reduced to one line. A plunge from the Eads Bridge. It is heartbreaking in its simplicity. It makes these shadows from the past feel very, very real, and it forces a hard question. When so much concentrated sadness is focused on one single point on the map, what happens to that point? We know what happens to the people, but what happens to the place? Does it just sit there, neutral, like a stage after the play is over? Or does it soak up the emotion of every single one of those moments? The decision, the final breath of cool air, the instant of regret that may have come too late. The archive doesn't talk about ghosts. It talks about facts, dates, times. But when you read enough of these facts, a feeling grows, a heavy, undeniable feeling. You realize you are looking at a list of endings, a catalogue of last moments, and every single one of those moments happened in the same spot, with the same river waiting below. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern, and a pattern that's strong. It has weight. It has a shape. It has a memory all its own. The bridge may be made of iron, but these archives, they are its true biography. A biography written in tears. We have the facts. We have the dates. But now, let's look at the shape of the tragedy. It wasn't random. People didn't just pick any spot on the bridge. They didn't come at all hours. When you map it out, a very clear, very chilling pattern emerges. And this pattern is the key to understanding everything. First, the location. Almost every single time, it happened at the central span, the highest point of the bridge, the very heart of the structure. You can see it. From there, you are truly suspended between the city and the river. You are at the peak. It's a conscious choice. You don't go to the side, where it's lower. You go to the very top, as if to make sure, as if the act requires being at the maximum point between sky and water. That spot, over a century, became marked by an unimaginable gravity. Then, the time. The records show a clear preference for night, the late evening or the very early morning hours before dawn. The time when the city is quiet, when you feel most alone in the world, when the river below is just a dark, moving shadow. They chose the time of isolation, the time when a person could be a ghost before they even became one. Now this is crucial. This pattern tells us something profound. This wasn't just about a high place. This was about a specific ritual, a terrible, final ritual, the walk to the center in the quiet dark. It happened so many times that it formed a path, not a physical path you can see, but a path in the mind, a well-worn thought. This is what experts call suicide contagion or copycat behavior. But that sounds too simple. It's not about copying. It's about an idea becoming a possibility. And then, that possibility becoming a known option. If you are in deep pain and you know of a place where others have gone to end their pain, that place enters your mind. It sits there. For most, the feeling passes. But for some, the idea doesn't go away. The bridge is already there in their thoughts, waiting. It has a reputation, and a reputation is a powerful, powerful thing. Think of it like this. A forest has no paths. Then one person walks through, breaking branches. A second person sees that faint trail and follows it, making it clearer. Soon, what was once wild is now a walking path for everyone. The Eads Bridge for the troubled mind became that path. The first person in 1904 broke the branches. Every person after that walked the same mental trail, making it wider, clearer, easier to find in the dark forest of their thoughts. So, we have to ask a harder question now. When a thought, a specific, tragic thought, is repeated by hundreds of people over decades, does it gain strength? Does it leave a mark on the physical world? We accept that happy places, like old churches or peaceful parks, can feel good. We say they have a nice atmosphere. Well, what is the opposite of that? What is the atmosphere of a place where one terrible, final thought has been thought thousands of times? The pattern is the evidence, the central span, the quiet night, the repetition. This tells us the bridge's danger wasn't an accident. It was a built-up energy, a focus point for despair. The iron held the cold. The river promised silence. And the pattern, the well-worn path of that final decision, that hung in the air itself. After a while, people weren't just choosing the bridge. In a way, the pattern was choosing them, pulling them toward the center, toward the dark, toward the completion of a ritual they didn't even know they were following. That is the true horror of the pattern. It works all by itself. Long after the person is gone, the pattern remains, waiting for the next heartbreak to come along and walk its lonely, familiar way. So far, we have looked at records, we have looked at dates and patterns, but now we need human voices. Not the voices of those who left, but the voices of those who stayed, the ones who were paid to watch. The guardians of the bridge. Their stories change everything, because these are not believers in ghosts. These are practical men, police officers, security guards, railroad workers. Their job was facts, not feelings, and that is what makes what they say so powerful. I spoke to a retired railroad policeman. His beat included the bridge at night, during the worst years. He told me about the sheer, empty silence up there, the wind whining through the ironwork, the distant lights of the city that felt a world away. And then he told me about the cold, not the weather, a different kind of cold. He said it would hit you in certain spots, usually near the central span, like walking into a pocket of air from a freezer. On a warm summer night, it would raise the hairs on your arms. He said every officer knew about those spots. They never talked about it much, but they knew. Another man, a night watchman in the 1970s, told me about the footsteps. He would make his rounds, his own boots clanging on the walkway. But sometimes he would stop to listen, and the footsteps would keep going for 1, 2, 3 more steps before they faded out. Just empty echoes from an empty bridge. He said it happened too many times to brush off. He started making a game of it. He'd stop suddenly, trying to catch it, and sometimes he did. But the most common story, the one I heard again and again, was about the feeling of being watched. Not in a scary way at first, just a sense that you were not alone on your walk. A pressure, like someone standing quietly behind your left shoulder. They would turn. Nothing. Just the long, dark lane of iron and light. These are tough men. They carried weapons. They dealt with real dangers. Yet, this quiet feeling of a presence unnerved them more than any threat from a living person ever could. Now let's think about this. These men were the experts on the bridge. They knew its sounds. They knew its normal creaks and groans. When they say something was off, we have to listen. They are the most reliable witnesses we have. They weren't looking for a ghost. They were just doing their job, and the bridge showed them something else. What were they feeling? Could it be just nerves? Maybe. Standing on a high, lonely place at night could make anyone imagine things. But these men weren't just anyone. This was their workplace. They were used to the height, used to the dark. Their fear wasn't of falling. It was of the strange, heavy sadness that seemed to settle on the bridge like a fog. One guard called it the weight. He said some nights it felt like the whole structure was sighing. This connects directly back to the pattern. to the archive of sorrow. If hundreds of people poured their final desperate emotion into this one place, what happens to that energy? Physics says energy doesn't vanish. It changes form. What if the guards, spending hundreds of hours there, were subtly sensing that changed energy, the leftover echo of all that concentrated human anguish? Not a ghost with a face and a name, but a recording of pure, raw feeling. Sadness, fear, regret, that plays back when the conditions are right, when the world is quiet, and a sensitive person, a guardian, is there to hear it. So the next time you dismiss a feeling as just your imagination, think of these guards. Think of these practical, no-nonsense men who all shared the same unexplainable experiences. They didn't go to the bridge to be afraid. The fear came to them. It was part of the job, and that might be the most convincing evidence of all, that the memory in the iron doesn't just sit there. Sometimes, on quiet nights, it reaches out, and it touches the living. The 1970s. Think of the sound of that decade. Rock and roll, social change. But on the Eads Bridge, there was another sound, a quieter one. The sound of a breaking point being reached. Not by individuals this time, but by the entire city. The tragedy had become a crisis. It was now a grim, public fact of life in St. Louis. And people had finally had enough. The numbers peaked here. The pattern we talked about. It became a flood. It seemed like every few months, the brief newspaper article would appear. The community was drowning in grief and in anger. The bridge was no longer a historic landmark in the minds of many. It was a menace, a deadly attractor. Editorials in the Post-Dispatch started demanding action. How many more? They asked. When will this stop? The city's conscience was screaming. Let's focus on one specific night. April 1975. It was a cool spring evening. A young man, just 24 years old, walked onto the bridge. We know from the reports that he parked his car on the Illinois side. He left his belongings neatly inside. He walked to the center of the main span. And he jumped. A railroad worker saw him fall. The call went out. Police and river rescue scrambled. But here is the detail that changes this story. This was not a secret. It was not a quiet event in the dead of night. It happened when people were around. It was witnessed. The shock waves from this one event spread through the city like a physical blow. It was the enough is enough moment. The public outcry was immediate, and it was loud. People wrote letters to the mayor. They called their city council members. They asked a simple, brutal question. Why is nothing being done to fix this? You have to understand the weight of that. For decades, the bridge's tragedy was seen as a private, sad fact, something that happened to troubled individuals. But now, the city itself saw it as a structural problem, a problem with the bridge itself. The bridge was hurting the community. It was stealing their sons and daughters. The city loved the bridge's history, but it was terrified of its present. This is a crucial turn in our story. The living energy of the city, its anger, its demand for safety, its love for its people, finally rose up to face the sad, heavy energy that had gathered on the bridge. This was no longer about ghosts. This was about politics. This was about engineering. This was about saving lives. So, what do? You can't tear down a national historic landmark, but you can't let the tragedies continue. The city and the railroad companies that owned the bridge were stuck. They needed a solution that respected the iron but protected the people. The pressure was immense. Every day they waited felt like a gamble with someone's life. That period, between the peak of the tragedies in the mid-70s and the final solution, must have been agonizing. Every police call to the bridge would have set hearts racing. Every foggy night would have been a worry. The bridge stood there, beautiful and terrible, waiting for its next visitor. The city watched it, now with a fearful eye. The love affair was over. It was time for an intervention. The stage was set for a fight between the memory and the iron and the will of the living to change the future. The bridge was about to get a new kind of guardian. Not a watchman with a flashlight, but a cage made of steel. The answer, when it finally came, was simple, and it was brutal. It was a fence. Not just any fence. If you walk the Eads Bridge today, you see them. Tall barriers, maybe 9 or 10 feet high, made of heavy wire mesh. And at the top, a curve. A smooth inward curve, like a hook. It looks like a cage. That's because it is. This is a suicide prevention barrier, and it is one of the most successful public health interventions this city ever made. The major renovation in the 1980s was the moment. The bridge was being repurposed for cars and pedestrians. It was getting a new life. And with that new life came this new skin. Engineers didn't just throw up a railing, they designed a puzzle. The height is the first thing. You cannot easily climb it. The curved top is the master stroke. It offers no grip, nothing to hold on to. If you try to climb, the curve pushes you back inward, toward the walkway. It is a physical argument against a mental state. It says no with geometry. And it worked. Almost immediately, the documented tragedies from the bridge stopped. The grim drumbeat from the archives, it ceased. The newspaper articles about plungers faded away. This fence saved lives. Full stop. It is a wonderful human victory. We solved a problem. We used our minds to protect our hearts. But, and this is where our story takes a strange turn. In the world of the supernatural, there is an uncomfortable idea. What does a barrier do? It keeps things out. Yes. But by that same rule, it can also keep things in. Think about it. For over a century, the bridge was an open window, a place where intense emotional energy, the energy of a final, terrible decision, was released. It happened, and then it was gone. Into the air or into the river. Now suddenly, that window was sealed shut. The fence went up. If you believe, as many cultures do, that strong emotions can leave an imprint on a place, what happened to all that energy that was already there? The energy from all those decades. It wasn't used up. It was just there, in the iron, in the stone. And now it was inside a new, stronger container. The fence didn't just keep new people out. It corralled the old memories inside. It trapped the history of the place within its new, secure walls. The bridge became a sealed vessel. A bottle with a very old, very sad message inside. Walk between those fences today. The view is still stunning. But the feeling is different. It's quieter, more closed in. You are protected, but you are also separated. You are in a hallway of iron and wire. You can look out, but you cannot touch the open edge. That old, terrifying freedom is gone. And in its place is a new kind of pressure, the pressure of containment. So, we have to ask a strange, double-sided question. Did we build a cage to protect people from the bridge? Or did we build a cage to protect people from what was on the bridge? The fence is a savior. It is also a lid. And what sits under that lid? The same sorrow that the guards felt, the same pattern that drew people to the center span, the same memories from the archive, all of it, still there, but now with nowhere left to go. The fence did its job. The tragedies stopped. So, the story should be over, right? The bridge is safe. The problem is solved. But here is the strange part. The feelings didn't stop. The experiences didn't stop. They just changed. The loud, violent end of the story is closed, but a soft, sad whisper remains. And this whisper is heard by people today. Normal people. People not looking for a ghost. Talk to the photographers, the ones who set up cameras for time-lapse shots of the city skyline at night. They'll tell you about the orbs, or streaks, that sometimes show up in their pictures, right near the central span. Not lens flare, not a bug, just a soft, unexplained light that moves through the frame and vanishes. It happens too often to ignore. They share these photos online with a simple question. What is this? Talk to the joggers who use the bridge at dawn. Every now and then, one will report a sudden, overwhelming feeling of sadness. It hits them in a wave, right in the middle of their run. Then it's gone. They shake it off, blame it on a bad night's sleep. But when they mention it to a running buddy, sometimes the buddy says, "Yeah, I felt that once too," right in the same spot. The most common report, the one that ties it all together, is the sound. Not a scream, not a cry, a sigh. A long, slow, tired sigh. It seems to come from the empty space next to you on the walkway, or from just the other side of the fence. People stop, look around. No one is there. It's heard most often on foggy nights, when the world is soft and quiet, when the bridge is wrapped in a grey blanket. Now what are we hearing? If the violent acts have ended, why does the gentle sadness remain? Think about a scar. The wound is long healed. The cut is closed. But the skin there is still tender. It still feels different when you touch it. It holds the memory of the injury. This is what the bridge feels like now. The acute pain is gone, but the tenderness remains. The memory is still in the tissue, in the iron. These modern whispers are not scary. They are not aggressive. They are mournful. They are lonely. This matches a theory in paranormal research, that what remains after a tragedy is often not an intelligent spirit, but an imprint, a recording of the dominant emotion. And what was the dominant emotion here for a century? Not anger, not hate. It was despair. It was a deep, hollow sadness, a sigh into the dark. So, the fence kept new pain out, but it left the old pain inside, and that old pain has softened with time. It has lost its sharp edges. It no longer pulls people toward the edge. Instead, it just exists. It drifts in the space between the fences. It sighs in the fog. It shows up as a mist in a photograph. When you walk across now, you are safe. Your body is safe. But your mind, your emotions, they might brush up against something else. Something old and tired and sad that never found its way across the river. It's not a danger. It's just a presence. A reality that we built a cage around, but could never quite clean away. The bridge is quiet now, but it is not empty. And on the right night, if you listen past the traffic and the wind, you might just hear its one simple truth. A truth that sounds just like a human sigh. Let's bring it all together. The sick workers in the dark caissons. The first shadow in 1904. The river that keeps secrets. The archive of tiny, sad articles. The pattern that became a path. The guards who felt the cold. The final breaking point. The fence that cages it all in. The modern sighs in the fog. What is the single thread that connects every single one of these things? It's memory, but not a memory in a mind, a memory in a material. The iron itself remembers. Science has a concept for this. It's called structural memory. When metal is stressed, when it is bent, heated, hammered, or vibrated, its microscopic structure changes. The tiny crystals inside it shift. They realign. They hold the shape of the force that hit them. A blacksmith bends a hot bar of iron. It cools. It holds the new shape forever. That's a physical memory. Now think bigger. Think of the Eads Bridge as that bar of iron. What forces have hit it? The incredible stress of holding itself up over the river, the constant rumbling vibration of trains for over 100 years, the shock of a sudden terrible impact, but also the softer forces, the pressure of a hand on its rail, the shuffle of a final footstep, the tremor of a sob. Energy is energy. A vibration is a vibration. Whether it comes from a train wheel or a breaking heart, it travels through the steel. So, the bridge is not haunted. It is a recording device, a giant iron record player. And it has been recording for 150 years. It recorded the groans of the sick workers. It recorded the rumble of every train. And yes, it recorded the final moments of every lost soul who came to its center span. Those moments of extreme emotion, of fear, of sadness, of finality, they left a mark, a tiny, permanent scratch in the crystalline structure of the metal. This is our revelation. The ghost is not a spirit. It is a playback. When the conditions are just right, a certain humidity, a certain temperature, a quiet night, the bridge replays. It replays the cold the guards felt. It replays the sigh that joggers hear. It replays the imprint of despair that photographers see as light. It is not a conscious thing. It is a natural thing, a scar talking about the wound. So, when you stand on the Eads Bridge, you are not standing on a haunted place. You are standing inside a memory, a vast, complex layered memory made of steel and stone. You are surrounded by the echoes of everything that has ever happened to it, the glorious and the grim, all mixed together, the triumph of engineering and the tragedy of human pain, vibrating in the same metal. This changes everything, doesn't it? It means every old building, every bridge, every monument. They aren't just empty boxes. They are libraries, libraries of experience. Most of the time, we can't read them. We just feel them, as a mood, an atmosphere, a chill, a sense of awe, or a sense of dread. The Eads Bridge is a teacher. It teaches us that places absorb our stories. It teaches us that our joys and our sorrows don't just vanish into thin air. They sink into the world around us. They become part of the physical reality of a place. The bridge did its job. It held the weight. And the weight it held wasn't just trains and cars. It was us. All of our beautiful, terrible, human weight. And if you listen closely now, you can still hear it holding. So, what have we learned about the Eads Bridge? We started in the deep, dark mud of the river. We met the workers who got sick in the pressurized chambers. Their pain was the first memory in the stone. Then, in 1904, the first shadow fell. A man chose this new modern bridge for a very old, private sorrow. He showed others a way. For decades, it became a pattern, a sad ritual. People came to the highest point, often at night. The river below took them and kept its secrets. The newspaper archives tell this story in short, sad lines. The city's hidden pain had a place to go, and the bridge held it all. The men who guarded the bridge felt it. They spoke of cold spots and footsteps with no source. They felt a heavy sadness that didn't belong to the weather. They were the first to sense the echo. Then came the breaking point. The 1970s were the worst. The city said, "Enough." The answer was a fence. A tall, clever fence that curves inward. It worked. It saved lives. It was a great victory. But it also created a container, a sealed space. Now the loud tragedy is gone. But a quiet whisper remains. Photographers catch strange lights. Joggers feel sudden sadness. People hear a sigh in the fog. The sharp pain has faded, but the tender scar remains. Here is the truth. The bridge is not haunted by ghosts with names. It is haunted by memory itself. The iron in the bridge is like a recording. It remembers every vibration, the rumble of trains, the shock of impact, the tremor of a final heartbeat. Science calls this structural memory. The metal holds the shape of every force that ever touched it. That means the sorrow is in the steel. It is in the stone. It is a real, physical thing. When you stand on the bridge today, you are safe. The fence protects you. But you are also standing inside a library of human feeling. A library built over 150 years. The Eads Bridge is a teacher. It teaches us that places are not empty. They absorb our stories. They hold our joys and our sorrows in their beams and their bricks. We built a cage around this history to protect the living. But we could not erase the past. It is still there, in the cool touch of the rail, in the sound of the wind through the iron. It is a monument to brilliant minds and to broken hearts. It is a bridge between our world and the quiet echo of all that was lost. Remember that. The next time you walk across any old place and you feel a chill or a sudden quiet in your soul, you might just be listening, and the memory around you might just be speaking.